Okay, so let us commence where we left off yesterday. Hector Chalavim Ve'ivarim, we're on Tes Samad Aleph, towards the very bottom. Hector Chalavim Ve'ivarim Vachilas Psachim, Mitzvasan Ad Sheyale Amud HaShachar. That a lot of sacrificial laws, where the Torah says that you offer it on that day, and you continue that practice of that korban through the night, either the continual burning of the fats and the entrails of that korban, or there are some korbanos that you're allowed to eat for only that day and then the following night. So the Mishnah had said, mitzvasan ad sheyala amud hashachar. How long do you have? You have until dawn. And then im kain, if so, why did the rabbi say that you should only do it, you can only eat it until chatzos, until midnight? Laharchik es ha'adam min ha'avera, to distance you from sin, which the Gemara will clarify what that means. So now the Yerushalmi tells us that they had a different girsa, anan taninan, that we have in our Mishnah, achilas psachim, and istalotani achilas psachim. So there is one girsa that says that included in this list of karbanos that you technically have until dawn, but the rabbis only allowed you until midnight, is eating of the korban pesach. But then there are those, and that's the Bavli's version, which do not have the words eating the korban pesach until midnight. Okay. So it's a machlokas tanoim until when you can actually eat the korban pesach. Because according to the Chachamim, the korban pesach can be eaten the entire night, and it's only Rabbi Eliezer who holds that you have until midnight to eat the korban pesach. So, man detana achilas psachim, rabbanan. If you hold that the word achilas psachim is included in our Mishnah, that really you have until dawn to eat the korban pesach, but only rabbinically did the rabbis say, we want you to eat it, have it all eaten before midnight. And if you don't have that girsa, that you have until dawn technically, but we want you to stop at midnight, that's because you hold like Rabbi Eliezer, because Rabbi Eliezer holds that you cannot eat it past midnight. It's not like you technically have until dawn, but rabbinically until midnight. According to Rabbi Eliezer, the deadline for eating the korban pesach is definitively midnight, and you can't go past it. So therefore, he would not include the eating of the korban pesach in this discussion. So now the Gemara asks, Uman taima the Rabbi Eliezer. And where does Rabbi Eliezer get this idea from that you only have until midnight? That's the absolute deadline to eat the korban pesach. Nemar kan laila, v'nemar lahalan laila. Because it says by the korban pesach, v'achalu et habasar balayla hazeh. They shall eat the meat on that night. They shall eat the meat on that night. So normally you would think that night means the entire night. So where does Rabbi Eliezer get this idea of midnight? B'nemar lahalan laila. But it also says in the context of makas bechoros, the plague of the firstborn, the word laila. Ve'avarti be'eretz Mitzrayim balayla hazeh. I will pass through Egypt on that night. Ma laila shenemar lahalan chatzos, afkan chatzos. Just like nighttime in the context of Makas Bechoros was that God smote the firstborn at midnight. That's the definition of Laila. So too, when the Torah says, eat the korban pesach at Laila, it means eat it until midnight. That's the way Rabbi Eliezer understands the pasuk. And there could be some kind of philosophical connection to the eating of the korban pesach and the plague of the firstborn. In other words,
the plague go all night. It didn't happen all at once. All firstborns died.
It's a good question. It seems like it happened, boom, the way the Yerushalmi is describing it, it happened exactly at midnight. They all dropped dead, right? So that was like the that's when the death came.
That's
And
not according to Charlton Heston.
yeah,
The fog went.
You have to stretch it out in Hollywood. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. This is true. This is true.
I'm dying, I'm
Yeah,
dying. The
yeah.
line goes on Paris.
Yeah. So, right. So it could be that Hashem wanted us to have that sense of liberation from Egypt up until the moment when the firstborn were killed. But it probably would not have been appropriate, according this is Rabbi Eliezer Shita, not appropriate to be celebrating the rejoicing over meat while a huge percentage of Egypt is dropping dead like flies. Okay, could
Also
be.
makes it more miraculous. Everyone died at the same moment, in the blink of an eye.
I guess so. I guess so. Okay, let us go on. Now, Amar Rabbi Chuna Veleskan, Achilas Psachim Afilu Kirabban. He says, now, let me also tell you, says Rabbi Chuna, I feel that that the topic of eating the Korban Pesach does not appear in our Mishnah, even according to the Chachamim, who hold that technically you have until dawn, but you should stop eating it at midnight. And what's my proof? The Taninan, because we learned in the Mishnah in Maseches Psachim, HaPesach achar chatzos mitameis hayadayim, that the Chachamim made a gzeira. They made a special injunction, and they said that if a person touches the Korban Pesach after chatzos, it renders his hands tamei. What they basically said, that if you forgot to eat the Korban Pesach or you didn't have time and chatzos has already arrived, you're not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach. So it's unlike other korbanos, where if you allowed midnight to lapse, the korban was still kosher. You could still eat it. And therefore, it should not be included in this list in our Mishnah, which is basically saying, lechatchila, do it until chatzos, but b'di'evid, even after chatzos is okay. He says, yeah, okay. Now, let's do the last part of the last quote from the Mishnah. Kol hane'echolim liyom echad, etc. Anything that can be eaten for the entire night is the mitzvah is until the dawn, but lechatchila you should eat it until midnight. Okay. Kol hane'echolim liyom echad kadshim kalim. Now, anything that is eaten for one whole day and the following night is coming to include, when it says kol, usually the word kol, like the language or the parlance of the Bavli would be la asuye mai. What is this word kol coming to include? Because kol means everything. And when you have a word that is an inclusive word like everything, it means that it's coming to let you know added information that you might not intuit on your own. So the Yerushalmi picks up on that idea as well, just doesn't use the same parlance as the Bavli. Lasuye, it's coming to include Kudshim Kalim. Really, because most Kudshim Kalim, now what is Kudshim Kalim? There are two different categories of Kudshim. There are lower level Kudshim and there's higher level Kudshim, higher level sacrificial meats. Lower level sacrificial meats can be eaten throughout the city of Yerushalayim. Higher level sacrificial meats can only be eaten within the temple. So therefore, an example of that would be a korban toda. If a person was to bring a Thanksgiving sacrifice because he just, let's say, recovered from illness or something like that, so those can be eaten until dawn, and the Chachamim decreed that you have to eat them before midnight, and don't think that they made that decree only on higher level kudshim. They made this decree on all kudshim, even lower level kachim that I might think, well, it's not as big of a deal, and therefore I can go until dawn.
Location, on
It's only what?
location and not on timing that is lesser.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And then finally, v'im kain lamra amru chachamim. Why did the chachamim say you only have until chatzos? In order to, what was the language of the Mishnah? Kidei laharchik es ha'adam min ha'avera, to distance a person from potential sin. So what
Like a fence.
im at oimer, if you would tell a person that he could eat his kachim ad sheyale amud hashachar until dawn, who savur shelo Allah amud hashachar, with the potential pitfall would be that he might think that dawn has not yet arrived,
Right.
because it's a very cloudy morning. V'nimsa oichel umischayev, and he would end up eating it, and then he would get kares. Because what is sacrificial meat that's left over beyond its deadline? It's called nosar.
Mhm.
And the Torah says that if you eat nosar korban meat, you get kares. Umitoch shat omerlo ad chatzos, afilu hu oichel achar chatzos einu mischayev. And therefore, by telling him that he only has until midnight to eat it, if he goes a few minutes after midnight, so then b'di'evet it's fine, and he certainly hasn't violated any biblical commandment for which the penalty would be kares. So that could
use this concept though by everything. No, you might miss out, so let's make it early, you do it by everything. So you see on the Torah, right? You do every halachic, whether it's karas or not karas, you use this concept. Can you not?
I do.
there are a lot of siyagim,
Rabbinic fences.
a lot of rabbinic fences. How many minutes before sunset are you supposed to light Shabbos candles? 18 minutes, right? What are some other siyagim? Torah says, don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. And we say, you got to wait 6 hours. Okay. And including, and then poultry and milk is also, that's another fence. There's plenty of fences all over the place. Erevin is I'm not sure if that would fall under the category of a fence, making a fence around the
Oh,
Torah.
it is a fence. Different kind of
I
fence,
mean, it's a different kind of fence. Yeah.
but not offensive.
Yeah, that would only be you, Paul.
Thank you, everybody. I deserve that.
All right.
We throw that in everywhere. It's used so often.
That's the first mission in Pirkei Avos. Asusiag la Torah. Okay. All right. So now
How
we're
do we
ready.
feel about eating Afikoman after midnight? I mean, does that tie into this? Is it the same?
Oh, so right. So thank you for bringing that
Not
up.
always offensive.
Yeah, right. Thanks for bringing that up. So that's actually the halacha. You have to eat the afikomen before midnight. And that's, and so usually because we start the Seder after daylight savings has already started, I think that's pretty much every year, even including this year, where Pesach came out really early, it was already daylight savings. So you have until like 1:15 a.m. to eat the afikomen. But it creates problems for people who want to have an extensive Seder. So they, we just have to remind people, eat the afikomen first, and then you can continue your Seder until Rabbeinu Higiyah Zman Kriya Shema Shel Shachar.
You can eat anything else. The Bikoman is the last thing you eat.
That's it.
But b'di'evet, if you ate afterwards, it would be a sin. It's the same sort of concept, but
No, it is a sin, yeah.
isn't there something about how you can say, so this thing about you can say it's the Afikoman, it's not, and then you ignore, and then I thought there was some game you could play with.
Yeah, there is that, because there is a machlokas in the poskim. Some poskim say that you could technically eat the afikomen until dawn, and so we only wanted, according to those poskim, we'll eat the matzah now before, and if it's if I am mechuyev to eat the afikomen by midnight, so then this is my afikomen, and if not, I'll have a kazayas matzah later. Yeah, there are some who hold that way. Yeah. Right. Okay. So let us continue with the next Mishnah. So we've actually, Baruch Hashem, so we got through a whole section of Gemara Yerushalmi. Now we're ready to start the next Mishnah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so pat yourselves on the back. We're on Tes Amid Beis, and you notice that the way that they start a new Mishnah is they call it a new halacha. Isn't that interesting? So we're up to halacha Beis. That's just the way all Mishnayos are structured. They call it a halacha, not Mishnah. And then it says Mishnah. So it's almost like chapter two of the first chapter. Okay. Me'emasai korena shema b'shacharin. So now that the first Mishnah dealt with Kriya Shema al Hamita, b'shoch b'cha. Now we're getting into uvekumecha, when you rise. Me'emasai korena shema b'shacharin. When is the earliest time that we can recite Kriya Shema? In the morning. Mishiyakir bein techelas l'lavan. When it's light enough that you can distinguish between techeles, which is a blue color of our tzitzis, and white. And Rabbi Eliezer Omer bein techeles l'karsan. Rabbi Eliezer says it has to be a little bit lighter than that. You have to be able to distinguish between two shades of blue. One is called techeles, and the other one is called karsi. Now, here, that's the Girson, the Bavli is karsi. Here it's karsan. Same thing. It's a type of greenish blue, like an aqua. And techeles is more of a straight, just like a sky blue. Yeah. So to be able to distinguish between those two shades, you need a lot more light than to be able to distinguish between white and techeles. Rabbi Eliezer Omer bein techeles, and until when can you recite Kriya Shema? Ad hanetz hachama. You have until sunrise, which is a very short window when you think about it. You have until it's after dawn, before sunrise is when you can start saying Kriya Shema, and you only have until sunrise to recite Kriya Shema. That's the time of waking up, apparently. It's waking up is when the sun is, once the sun is above the horizon, that's sunrise, already too late. But
we don't hold like that.
We don't hold like that. But Rabbi Yoshua Omer, ad shalosh shos, Rabbi Yoshua says you have until 3 hours, and it's a machlokes whether that means until the beginning of the third hour or for the entire through the third hour. So the difference would be, do you have until 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. in a 12-hour day, right? Okay. Shekain derech b'nei malachim la'amod b'shalosh shos, because that's typically when kings wake up. And so therefore it's still considered to be ufikumecha, when you rise. Even though, Farmer John is going to get up at the crack of dawn, but there are men of leisure. We call them the guys who go to the 8:30 minute. Yeah, those are the guys who get up much later. So that's why we have an 8:30 minyan. We have the bankers. Okay, hakore mikan va'elach lo hifsid ka'adam shu kore batorah. Now, if a person recites past the Zman of Kriya Shema, past the Zman of waking up, he has not lost out. Meaning, what does that mean? He's not lost out. Which it means he's not doing anything wrong. It doesn't mean he's not lost out. Of course he's lost out. He missed the mitzvah of reciting Kriya Shema in the morning. But you don't lose anything by reciting it. You're not in violation of anything. Because you're no different from anyone who wants to study some psukim from the Torah, because the Shema is from the Torah. So you can recite psukim in the Torah whenever you want. So therefore, what the Mishnah is advocating is that if you missed out reciting Kriya Shema in the proper time, you should recite it afterwards because you're not doing anything wrong. You're only gaining. Okay? So, yeah.
There's other reasons too, because it has to connect to the Shemona Esrei, say too.
So so that's an interesting thing. So that there would be a benefit of having words of Torah and Emunah be adjacent to your recital of Shemona Esrei. So that would certainly be a benefit as well.
Rabbi, it's like counting the Omer without the bracha?
Right,
Something
right.
like that.
Similar to counting the Omer. Well,
That keeps you in the game.
there's a machlokes whether the mitzvah is each individual day or whether it's you got to do all in order to do the mitzvah. Here, there's no suffix. Here, there's no doubt. You definitely have lost out on the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, of uvekumecha, when you rise. But, like Paul says, there may be other benefits.
Robert, does this apply if you miss the one for the night? So if you say that late, you get Torah Sod also for learning Torah?
Right. Well, that was one thought that the Gemara had about Rabbi Gamliel. Remember, the Gemara had suggested that maybe Rabbi Gamliel, on a public policy level, holds like the Chachamim. So maybe what he was telling his sons was, you guys go ahead and recite Kriya Shema because you don't lose anything. So the Gemara, I think, had questioned that as a possibility. If you remember, the Gemara had said, well, then why did he tell them only until dawn? If he's just telling them, yeah. So that's.
Well, I thought this Lubavitch get away with starting davening, so like, how do they justify this one period?
They recite the Shema independently before davening starts. Yeah, that's how that's.
So they don't move off from that.
They tell them. I mean, the Unzera Lubavitchers, in other words, the ones who know the halacha, they tell people, recite Kriya Shema before we start davening. The real from Lubavitchers come to shul quite early and recite Tehillim and stuff like that. And they go to mikveh. In other words, a real chassid is someone who's extremely pious and gets up really early on Shabbos morning. He may not start davening until 10 a.m., but that doesn't mean that he's
This is what to do.
he's in the swimming pool until then. He's doing a lot of stuff. Yeah. Okay. All righty. So let's take a look at the Gemara. So, the question is, when it says you have to be able to distinguish between white and blue, it doesn't seem that the intention is if you have a whole bundle of blue wool and you have a whole bundle of white wool, he says, because even at nighttime, even a slight just glint of light will allow you to distinguish when you have a huge amount. So Kani Masnisa, so what the Mishnah really means to say is Bein Techeles Shaba Lelavan Shaba, meaning that we're talking about your tzitzis. Like if you were to pick up a garment of tzitzis and look at the fringes, you'd be able to tell the difference between the blue string and the white strings. The blue string.
A single string.
Right. So I can, in this kind of light, I can see very, very easily the difference between Techeles and Lavan. But if it was a little bit darker in here, it might take me a little bit more time to be able to distinguish that. Okay. And by the way, there are different ways of calculating this measurement. What do we call that measurement, that moment when you can distinguish between blue and white? We call that in our calendars Mishayakir. That's the word for that time. And why does that have ramifications for our davening? Because you're not supposed to, you're only supposed to put on your tefillin after Misha Yakir. So there are times during the year in the winter when sunrise is very late, dawn is very late, and sunrise is very late. So we allow our practice is that we allow people to start davening from dawn, but we don't allow people to put on talis and tefillin until the shir of Misha Yakir,
Effectively say
which
the bracha.
is approximately 12 minutes after dawn, using our calendar measurements. So this happens routinely for like
That's good. Yeah.
6 weeks in the winter for the
That's 6:30.
for the 6:30 minyan.
Yeah.
So they have a whiteboard in the 6:30 minyan that tells you what time the shir of Misha Yakir is.
Yeah, I know.
And so there are different ways that people maneuver that. How do you maneuver that? So you started davening. So some people, the Mishnah Berurah actually offers you different alternatives. One alternative is to start davening, and then when you finish Pesukei de Zimra and you finish Yishtabach, you say Baruch Olamim.
Yeah.
Then you you put on your talis and tefillin with the bracha, even though normally you're not supposed to have any hefsek, any interruption between Yishtabach and Baruch Hu. This is the one exception that is allowed because there's no other option.
Mm-hmm.
It's not optimal, right? It's not something that we would say, do it lechatchila, like if you wake up in the morning and it's already light outside. We don't give you lechatchila the option of saying all of Psukei de Zimra without your talis and tefillin and then putting it on after Yishtabach. But in a situation like this, the rabbis are quite permissive because, people want to be able to get their day started. Another option that the Mishnah Berurah offers is for you to put on talis and tefillin without a bracha before the time of Misha Yakir, where you say to yourself, I'm putting these on, but not for the sake of the mitzvah yet, because the time of the mitzvah has not arrived. Yeah. And then after Yishtabach, it says, the Mishnah Berurah says, Yamashmesh, or you should touch your tzitzis and say the bracha, then touch your tefillin and then say the bracha on your tefillin.
So you can talk while you're putting on your phone without saying bracha? So.
Yes. Yeah.
That's weird.
It is weird, but
Because they're not really on. But is that what we're saying? That if you haven't said the bracha yet, they're not really on.
well, they're on.
And they're not on
but
for the
they're
mitzvah.
but they're not on for the sake of the mitzvah.
But it also gets you into the bad practice of speaking with them on.
Well, what I usually do is I'm davening when I'm putting on my talis and tefillin before Misha Yakir. I'm saying other brachas.
Right.
So
you make all three brachas and then you continue with bracha.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or Kaddish and then bracha. Yeah.
Just touching, not moving around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I usually shift it a little bit, just.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
presume there's a problem in doing that in the middle of Psukei de Zimra. You should wait till after Yishtabach.
You have to wait until after Yishtabach because that's the reason why you're not allowed to speak during Psukei de Zimra, because the Baruch Sha'amar is considered to be the opening bracha, and Yishtabach is considered to be the ending bracha. And just like you're not allowed to speak in the middle of a bracha, Psukei de Zimra is considered to be one long bracha. I know that not everyone is so observant in this area. I see it all the time.
Yes.
When especially on Shabbos morning, if someone comes over to you and you want to say good Shabbos to them, but you should really know that, once you've already said Baruch She'amar, you're not supposed to speak. Just give them a nice smile.
So skip Baruch Shamar, go ahead and say Baruch Shamar.
Well, that's, Nusach Sfard says
why.
Baruch She'amar. That's not, I don't know if that's why. Because they're more talkative, the guys who daven in Nusach Sfard. Yeah, but you are allowed to speak up until Baruch She'amar. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So, Uma ta'amin derabanan. What is the reasoning of the Chachamim that you have to start from the time that you can distinguish between white and tcheles? So the answer is because the Torah says, Uri'isem oso, you shall see the blue string. So you have to be able to say min hasamachlo. You have to be able not only to see it, but to distinguish it. That's what the word seems to imply, to distinguish it from the string that is right next to it.
Don't we use this for like wearing tzitzis at night, that you don't have to necessarily wear tzitzis at night, or you said myself?
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's the lima that the Gemara makes, that you don't have to wear tzitzis, you're putter from wearing tzitzis. Okay.
When you're swing, introduce the manual key to tip.
Why? What does one have to do with the other?
You don't see it.
Oh, you mean when you say Kriya